when you've had a chance to review everyone, if you could let me know if there's any conflict or not.
I do not see any conflict for myself, Judge.
Thank you.
I don't see any conflict, Judge.
Thank you.
And neither do I, Your Honor.
Okay, good. We can go ahead and start. Is each side, I understand that Team Aaron is going to be the plaintiff, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Team Angela is the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Judge, real fast, if I could just put us on hold for a few minutes while we conflict checked out a few other courtrooms, just to make sure that we have had a few conflicts. So we are working on justifying all of that. If you could give us a few minutes.
You bet.
Thank you. We just need to clear one more room. We are almost there. Cleared. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 10 can go.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go through my pretrial checklist, just to make sure we understand everything. As I understand, Team Aaron and Team Angela are both ready to proceed. Is that correct?
Yes, Your
Yes.
Honor.
Okay, thank you. We all have copies of your roster. And do all of you have your trial notebooks?
Yes, Your Honor.
Each team? each member?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Um, As I understand it, everyone has consented that this is being videoed and it's being sent through YouTube, live streamed through YouTube. I understand that both teams have consented. If there's any objection, please speak up now.
The plaintiff has no objection, Your Honor.
And the defense has no objection, Your Honor, either.
Okay. One thing you need to keep in mind is there will be no recesses unless there's a health emergency. So we will just continue to run through the trial. If there is some type of a health emergency, just feel free to interrupt and let me know. But short of that, there will be no recesses. Time requirements will be very strictly kept. And if you run over your time at all, number one, I'll interrupt and let you know that. But secondly, that will be taken into account in scoring that particular presentation. So be careful to keep to your time limits. What I'd like each team to do now, and we'll start with the plaintiff, is introduce each member of your team, including the participants, and then the witnesses, and then the timekeepers. Team Aaron, plaintiff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Rachel Kidder, and I, along with my co-counsel, represent the plaintiff Dakota Weirs. I will be giving the closing argument, as well as conducting the direct examination of Carson Durst, my apologies, and the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt. May my co-counsel introduce themselves?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Peterson, and I will be giving the opening statement as well as conducting the direct examination of Dakota Weirs and the cross-examination of Skylar Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Esther Fan, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers and the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams. May our client and witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Kenya David, and I am Dakota Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Landon Stuckey, and I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Violet Thompson, and I am Carson Durst.
Thank you. And timekeepers or timekeeper for your team?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Gray, and I am the timekeeper for the plaintiff.
Thank you. Can we have introductions of the defense, please?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Brendan Maher. I will be delivering the opening statement, directing Blake Doncourt and cross-examining Carson Durst. At this time, my co-counsel would like to introduce themselves.
Yes, please.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Jaden Inks, and I will be giving the direct examination of Skylar Weirs, as well as the cross-examination of Dr. Casey Rogers.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Will Damon, and I'll be delivering the direct examination of Dr. Devin Williams, the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs, as well as our closing argument. Your Honor, at this time, our witnesses would like to introduce themselves.
Yes, please.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is V Wing, and I am Devin Williams.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Mary Oswald, and I am Skylar Weirs.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Jet, and I am Blake Doncourt.
Thank you. And your timekeeper?
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Kayla Nergeth, and I will be the timekeeper for the defense.
Okay, thank you. Have we gotten everybody or did I forget anyone?
No, Your Honor, you got everybody.
All right, let me make a request to the timekeepers. If you remember, I found in the first round that when a timekeeper will put in the time remaining in the chat, it's very helpful if you say, for example, so many minutes left direct exam, or so many minutes cross exam. Because what I found I was doing in the chat is I would see, 10 minutes, 8 minutes, and then we'd go to a different segment and I'd see 12 minutes. And I had to keep reminding myself, are we on direct? Are we on cross? So if you remember to add that, it's helpful. If you don't, we'll manage. But if you remember, it would help. Next thing I'd like to do is have everyone take the oath. And I'd like to have your screens on, and I'd like to have your microphones unmuted when you do that. And just indicate affirmatively by saying yes, if you agree to the oath. Let me start, first of all, with the team members who will be presenting as counsel. And this is for both plaintiff and defense. Please raise your right hands. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes,
Yes,
Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Witnesses, please raise your right hands. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements? That you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition?
Yes,
Your Honor.
And finally, for the scoring panelists, if you'd raise your right hands, please. Scoring panelists, do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible, in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you all very much. We're ready to begin. We'll begin with opening statements. Each side gets 5 minutes for their opening statements, and plaintiff, we will begin with you.
Your Honor, may we address some preliminary matters first?
Yes?
Thank you, Your Honor. First, in accordance with the rules of mock trial, it is our understanding to admit an exhibit into evidence, we must screen share while we lay the foundation of that exhibit. We request that that constructively be kept out of the eyes of the jury until we move to publish that exhibit to the jury.
Okay, that is a reasonable request. That should be fairly easy with this jury. So I agree with your approach, and that's what we will do.
Next, Your Honor, in accordance with the rules of mock trial, we request that in the event of any technical difficulty, the clock be stopped immediately and that time not count toward either side.
That's reasonable. We will do that.
Next, Your Honor, there are 2 witnesses with the last name of Weirs in this case, Dakota Weirs and Skylar Weirs. We request, when appropriate, to be able to refer to them by first name only for clarity's sake.
And does the defense have a position on that?
We have no objection to that, Your Honor.
I would actually prefer, and I understand in keeping with normal courtroom procedure, to refer to the witness by last name. If it looks like there's going to be any confusion in addressing a witness, you can use both first and last name. But I'd prefer to not use just first names. So we'll proceed with last names.
Of course, Your Honor. And finally, it is our understanding that we must provide you with a list of the stipulated facts if you do not already have your own, and we are prepared to screen share those for you if you would like.
I have them and I've read them. So that's already taken care of.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Does the defense have any pretrial matters?
Yes, Your Honor. On behalf of both teams, let the record reflect that one of my teammates will be posting the appropriate trial rosters for competition in the Zoom chat, and I assume that the other team will do the same.
Well, we already have your rosters. They've already been given to us by the courtroom monitor.
Moving along with that.
Does that take care of that concern?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Let the record reflect that both teams have agreed to the stipulated facts that have been given.
Okay, so agreed.
And then, Your Honor, we ask what the court's preference is on redirect or re-cross examination.
I will ask if there's any redirect, and that will be up to the examining attorney, whether they want to do redirect or not. Keep in mind your time constraints. If I allow redirect, I'm probably, depending upon time constraints, probably going to allow brief recross.
Yes, Your Honor.
I would caution both sides that the more you do on redirect, the more you do on recross, you're using some of your allotted time.
Yes, Your Honor. And we also ask, or we want to point out that if at any point in the trial that any of the scoring panelists or you yourself cannot hear somebody, to point it out and let the trial freeze for a moment and allow that technical difficulty to be fixed.
Yeah, that's certainly a reasonable request. If that happens, anyone can let me know by, you can orally interrupt and just say it if that's possible. You can put something in the chat or you can raise your hand.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And finally, we ask that our timekeepers, both teams, be allowed to share the time remaining in the chat in order to let the team members know.
Yes. Yes, it's my understanding that's the procedure that we follow. And,
Okay.
and I think that is very wise. So everyone knows how much time is left.
Thank you, Your Honor. No
Anything
further
else?
matters.
Are we ready for openings?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, plaintiff, please present your opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. A wolf in sheep's clothing. That is what the evidence will establish today. Lush Fertilizer will present itself as a good citizen that cares about the environment, but it knew that its products could cause cancer, and it covered up that risk because of greed. Now a beautiful young woman who used Lush Fertilizer has been stricken with non-Hodgkin lymphoma and is not just facing a devastating disability, but possibly the end of her life. Good afternoon, members of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Peterson, and I am honored to represent Dakota Weirs, an outstanding young woman whose life has been tragically altered by Lush Fertilizer. We will prove to you today, by preponderance of the evidence, that Lush has crushed her dreams by creating a product that caused her non-Hodgkin lymphoma. In doing so, Lush was negligent. Let me tell you about Dakota Weirs. She was an active member in her community who regularly volunteered at the homeless shelter, a member of the Honor Society, president of her school. But what she loved dearly was her grandfather, who taught her how to play the piano. She was not just an accomplished pianist, but was accepted into Juilliard, one of the world's most prestigious music schools. Ms. Weirs was also a hard worker, and beginning at age 14, she had a job with Haven Landscaping. Lush wants these kinds of businesses to use its products, and indeed, Ms. Weirs used its fertilizer all the time. Unfortunately, that fertilizer contained a cancer-causing chemical called Drufo. After years of using Drufo in her job, Ms. Weirs became extremely ill. She was bruising easily, was constantly feeling fatigued, and began to experience shortness of breath, frequent chills, chest pains, swollen lymph nodes, and depression. She lost massive amounts of weight. Her abdomen swelled to double its normal size. The doctors finally diagnosed her with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Then, the defense, we will first call Dr. Casey Rogers, an expert witness in agriculture and chemistry. He will testify that Drufo is carcinogenic. Dr. Rogers conducted experiments that proved this. He will testify that to a high degree of scientific probability, Dakota developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma due to prolonged exposure to Drufo. Next, we will call Carson Durst, a former employee of Lush Fertilizer. Ms. Durst will show you Lush's own internal studies and an email proving Lush knew about Drufo's danger. They then buried that information because making Drufo safe would cut into its profits. Finally, you will hear from Ms. Weirs herself. She will tell you all that Lush Fertilizer has taken from her. Her testimony will be compelling. The defense will call Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush, who deliberately disregarded the safety reports about Drufo. He could have eliminated all risk by simply baking Drufo, which would not have changed its effectiveness. The defense will also shockingly call Dakota Weir's twin sibling Skylar Weirs, a 20-year-old conspiracy theorist, to testify against her. Why would a defendant be so desperate? Because apparently she's the best expert Lush could find. Finally, the defense will call Dr. Devin Williams, who will admit that she is financially biased. Members of the jury, Lush fertilizer is not saving the planet. It is killing precisely the people who are supposed to be using its products. Our burden today is to prove that by the slightest of weight, it is more likely than not Drufo caused Ms. Weir's cancer. We do not have to eliminate other causes, and you'll hear nothing from the defense, absolutely nothing, pointing to any other product that could have done this. On the contrary, Lush documents and scientific evidence will prove that Drufo can and did cause cancer. My co-counsel, Rachel Kidder, will ask you at the end of this case to find in favor of Dakota Weirs and give her the justice she deserves. Demask the wolf and expose Lush Fertilizer for what it truly is: a company that puts corporate profits above consumer protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Ms. Carlton, do you have an opening statement for the defense?
Your Honor, it's actually Brendan Maher giving the
I'm
opening.
sorry, I misread the roster. Opening statement for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor, that's okay. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, my co-counsel and I are here today to represent our client, Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. This case consists of the miscalculated, the misplaced, and the misused. Since the year 2000, Blake Doncourt has grown his company, Lush Fertilizer Incorporated, from its very small roots through very thorough research and development and a significant amount of capital into one of the world's largest suppliers of yard and commercial fertilizer. Lush Fertilizer was the flagship product that allowed businesses and individuals alike to have that vibrant green grass that everybody loves. And this is made possible through Drufo, a patented bonding agent made by Lush. Lush Fertilizer Incorporated and Mr. Blake Doncourt are focused on the environment and the good that humans can put back into the earth. They donate 10% of their annual earnings towards charities focused on decreasing the world's global nitrogen footprint. They also have been instrumental in the education of environmental issues worldwide, with helping to create state and national legislation to further that education. Our client is now facing the accusation that their bonding agent, Drufo, is linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and that they ignored research and data concluding so. Their extensive research and testing before the release of their product did not identify any such link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, or any cancer for that matter. And this is a miscalculation of others. Since there was little to no risk of a person using the fertilizer, there was no need under state or federal law to put a warning label on the product. But even then, they still put a label on their product with precautionary matters to help everybody be safe while using the product. Today, you will hear from 3 witnesses from the defense. First, Dr. Devin Williams, the lead at the Toxicology Research Development Labs at Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. Skylar Weirs, an investigative journalism with knowledge of modern agritech and the twin sibling of the defendant, or the plaintiff, sorry. And finally, Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. Dr. Devin Williams will testify to her involvement in the development of Drufo, the research that went into developing the chemical, as well as her expert opinion on the miscalculated studies of other researchers in her field. Skylar Weirs would testify to her findings on modern agritech and how the chemical Drufo was misplaced as a carcinogenic. She will also testify to her relationship with the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs. And lastly, Blake Doncourt will testify to the good nature of his company, the amount of extensive research that went into the production of Lush Fertilizer, and how Carson Durst misused their training and his connection to go and use his his knowledge with a direct competitor. The miscalculation, the misplaced, and the misused. The plaintiff will also call 3 witnesses today. Dakota Weirs, the plaintiff who tragically developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma and is now accusing Lush Fertilizer of hiding or willfully ignoring data that would have prevented her, her condition getting worse. And then Carson Durst, a former employee of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated that was fired and then got employed at the biggest competitor of Lush Fertilizer, Terra's Greenery, just to spite Blake Doncourt, and Dr. Casey Rogers, a professor at the University of California at Berkeley. As the defense, we do not hold the burden of proof. That responsibility lies solely upon the plaintiff. They must prove these 4 statements: that Lush Fertilizer contains the binding agent Drufo, Lush Fertilizer Incorporated was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent unreasonable harm, that Dakota Weirs was reasonably expected to use said product, and finally, that Dakota Weirs' damages were caused by the negligence of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. If you find that any of these 4 statements have not been proven, then your verdict must be for the defense. And in our closing statement, my co-counsel, Will Damon, will ask for you to plead with the defense. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Maher. Plaintiff, please call your first witness.
The plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers.
Dr. Rogers, you've already been sworn according to our rules of the competition. Counsel, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Casey Rogers.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Rogers?
I am a professor in the Horticulture and Entomology Department at the University of California at Berkeley.
Please tell the jury about your education.
I received a Bachelor's of Science degree in Agriculture and Chemistry and a PhD in Agriculture and Entomology from the University of California at Berkeley.
In your professional career, have you had a particular area of study or emphasis?
Yes, the negative and harmful effects of extended human exposure to various chemicals.
Let's discuss that. What have you done in your studies of the harmful effects of chemicals?
I have published 4 extensive studies on the negative and harmful effects that various chemicals have on humans, and specifically the negative effect that Drufo has on humans. I have also studied the chemicals themselves with a mass spectrometer.
Has your research been utilized by others?
Yes, it has. My research has been used in litigation. It's been admitted before administrative advisory boards, and I have made recommendations to agricultural companies and regulatory agencies on precautions that should be taken by workers who are exposed to chemicals.
You mentioned litigation. Have you ever testified as an expert witness before?
No, I haven't. This is my first time in court.
Finally, how long have you been studying Drufo and its harmful effects?
Since the time it was introduced into the market, so about 20 years now.
Your Honor, the plaintiff offers Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert witness concerning the effects on the human body of prolonged exposure to chemicals and specifically exposure to Drufo.
Any objection?
Your Honor, at this time, I have no objection, seeing that this expert witness will stay within the bounds of the expertise that they've been entered in as effects on the human body and the prolonged exposure to Drufo.
The witness will be so admitted as an expert to offer opinions on that area. You may proceed.
Dr. Rogers, we all know this case is about Drufo. Please tell the jury just what Drufo is.
Drufo is a chemical used in fertilizer. It binds to the nitrogen to preserve it and keep it intact. It was developed by Lush Fertilizer. I have personally analyzed the chemical makeup of each of Lush Fertilizer's products sold in the US, and Drufo is in all of them.
What drew your attention to Drufo in the first place?
Well, when it first hit the market, I believe that Drufo was unusually rushed into production, leading me to conclude that its safety was not sufficiently studied prior to giving it to the consumer.
So what did you do?
I conducted my own study to see if there were harmful effects on persons who were exposed to Drufo over long periods of time.
Tell the jury about your study, please.
Sure. I tested 3 groups of people.
Honor.
One group had never been exposed to Jufo before.
Your Honor.
Yes.
I made an objection at the beginning of this witness responses. I was going to object to the question as it calls for narrative.
What is the pending question?
I asked sorry,
Oh, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
I asked Dr. Rogers to tell the jury about his study.
I'm going to overrule the objection, although I would caution the witness, keep it brief.
Dr. Rogers, please continue telling the jury about your study.
I tested 3 groups of people. One group had never been exposed to Jufo before. This is known as the control group. The second group had occasionally been exposed to Jufo, and the third group had been exposed to Jufo on almost a daily basis. The study monitored the groups of people for a number of years following the exposure.
Dr. Rogers, what did you conclude?
My study showed a significant increase in serious health conditions and diagnoses in those who were exposed to Jufo as compared to the control group. Specifically, my study found higher incidences of cancer, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
How significant was the increased risk of cancer?
Those with just an occasional exposure to Jufo had a 500% increased risk of cancer. And those with prolonged exposure to Jufo had a 1,000% increased risk of cancer.
Are you familiar with Ms. Dakota Weir's level of exposure?
Yes, I am. I reviewed her medical and employment records.
Based on her exposure, what was her risk?
Well, Ms. Weirs was exposed to Jufo regularly for 4 years, meaning prolonged exposure to Jufo since it is in all of Lush Fertilizer's products. This exposure gave her the highest risk. Ms. Weirs had a 1,000% increased risk of cancer because of Jufo.
Dr. Rogers, based on all your study and analysis, have you formed an opinion concerning Ms. Weir's exposure to Jufo?
Yes, I have.
What is that opinion?
To a reasonable degree of scientific probability, there is a correlation between exposure to Jufo and Ms. Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
You just mentioned non-Hodgkin lymphoma. In your research and investigation, did you study non-Hodgkin lymphoma or NHL?
Yes, I did.
What is NHL?
NHL is a specific type of cancer caused by exposure to an environmental condition. It enters the body either by being inhaled or by absorption through the skin. Since it affects the white blood cells, also known as lymphocytes, and since the lymphocytes are part of the immune system, the body can become compromised and would be more susceptible to disease.
Dr. Rogers, what is the survival rate of NHL?
The 5-year survival rate for NHL is only 72%.
Is there any treatment for NHL?
Yes, attempts can be made to control it with chemotherapy, surgery, or other efforts, but these efforts are expensive and always carry a degree of risk.
Can NHL be cured?
Objection, Your Honor. This information is being brought in not within the scope of this witness's expertise, as they are not a medical doctor. They cannot render a diagnosis and or any other medical treatment to any other patients, specifically because they have no training as a doctor or a medical professional.
Response?
Your Honor, under Rule 702, there are 5 ways an expert can be qualified as an expert witness. 2 of these are knowledge and education. Dr. Rogers, through all of his studies, has sufficient knowledge and education to testify about non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Furthermore, he is not making a medical diagnosis. He is just offering general information.
A response, if I may, Your Honor.
You may.
Your Honor, as this witness was entered specifically under the fields of effect on the human body and prolonged effects of the effects of Jufo on the human body and prolonged effects of exposure on the human body, I do not believe that this has to be brought up now. In regards to Rule 702, this should have been addressed in the entering of the expertise. And as Dr. Casey Rogers is not a medical expert, is not a doctor, and has not been entered as such, the question is asking to understand how you could perform a diagnosis of such factors, and this is not within the bounds of what they have been entered in as a witness.
So I agree that under Rule 702, the witness has specialized knowledge training and experience that allows him to offer opinions, including opinions regarding the effects on the human body. The fact that he's not a medical doctor, I believe, goes to the weight of his credibility, but not its admissibility. Therefore, the objection is overruled, and I will allow him to express his opinion.
Let me ask that question again. Can NHL be cured?
No. There is no cure for non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Ms. Weirs will have to live with this horrible cancer and these terrible symptoms for the rest of her life because of Drufo.
In your research and investigation, did you study any way to stop Drufo from entering the body?
Yes, I recommended the use of gloves, a mask, and some other protective gear, but the results of the study on protective gear were inconclusive, as the protective gear is not usually supplied to the workers, and I didn't have sufficient time to study the long-term effects of the protective gear. So, short of discontinuing the use of Drufo altogether, there is no completely safe way to stop it from entering the body.
Finally, Dr. Rogers, in your professional opinion, did Ms. Weir's NHL have anything to do with her exposure to Drufo?
Yes. To a high degree of scientific probability, Ms. Weirs developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma because of her exposure to Drufo.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Inks, cross-exam for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Dr. Rogers. You testified today about a study you conducted concerning Drufo.
Yes, I did.
And this study includes a control group of people who had never been exposed to Drufo.
Yeah, it included three people, three groups, a control group who had never been exposed to Drufo, a group who had occasionally been exposed to Drufo, and a group had been exposed to Drufo on almost a daily basis.
And this study also, it included people who often worked with these chemicals, and like farm laborers.
My study did include farm laborers.
And these laborers have had the potential to be exposed to other chemicals as well in this study?
Well, of course, I can't put people in a controlled environment to test them. They have to go about their daily lives. So, of course, they were exposed to other chemicals in their daily lives, but it was obvious that Drufo has a correlation to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
So this study does not account for the other chemicals that farmers could have been exposed to.
Well, Drufo is the only chemical that really caught my attention. So Drufo is what my study was on. So no, it doesn't account for other chemicals.
Moving forward in this examination, a yes or no answer will suffice. Thank you.
I can't guarantee that, but I will try my best.
So you cannot account for other chemicals being involved within the study.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
You cannot account for other chemicals that these farmers could have been exposed to during their time in your study.
Well, like I said, they have to go about their daily lives. So of course they're going to be exposed to other chemicals.
Therefore, you cannot definitively say that Drufo was the sole cause of cancer because there could have been other chemicals involved.
Well, like I just said, there were other chemicals involved, of course, because they have to go about their daily lives. But based on the study I conducted, it is very likely that Drufo was the main cause.
And in addition, this study that you've provided for the court today has never been peer reviewed.
I don't believe I mentioned that in my witness statement.
I'd like to now address some further aspects of your study. In your study, you made some recommendations for using protective clothing when using Drufo.
Yes, I did.
These protective measures such as long sleeves,
Yes.
medical grade protective masks,
Yes.
and pants.
Yes.
But the plaintiff Dakota Weirs never used these.
I'm not sure if she never used them. I know there were times that she didn't use them, but in any case, the results on that study were inconclusive, like I said, because the protective gear isn't usually supplied to the workers, and I didn't have sufficient time to study the long-term effects of the protective gear. So I'm not even sure if it would have made a difference.
And all of these recommendations to reduce exposure and related risks were related to the exposure to dangerous chemicals?
Yes, I believe so.
However, protective gear was not to be provided by Lush, but rather by the landscaping companies themselves.
Objection,
discuss that in my
speculation.
Overruled.
I don't discuss that in my witness statement.
And if there was to be testimony that someone did not wear protective clothing, this would contradict your recommendations.
Yes, like I said, I did make recommendations on the use of protective gear.
However, your recommendations were found inconclusive, correct?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not sure if it would have made a difference.
And specifically in regards to the plaintiff, as well as part of your investigation, you reviewed Dakota's medical records, correct?
Yes, I did.
As well as employment records?
Yes.
But you did not indicate that you reviewed all the other chemicals that Ms. Weirs had been exposed to in her years of working at Haven Landscape.
I can't review every single chemical that Ms. Weirs was ever exposed to. But Drufo is what my study was on, and Drufo is what I believed caused Ms. Weirs non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
But definitively, you cannot say statistically that there is a 100% chance that Drufo caused Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
It's to a very high degree of scientific probability.
Is that a yes or a no?
I'm not sure based on your question, but I cannot say as a 100% guarantee. I'm not a medical doctor, but based on the statistics, it's very likely.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Dr. Rogers, on cross-examination, you were asked about having variables in your study. Does that affect the validity of your study?
No, not at all. We cannot put people in a controlled environment and limit their exposure to a single chemical. So they have to go about their daily lives and they will be exposed to other chemicals. That's just the way it is. So it does not affect my study. It's still very likely that there's a correlation between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor, not at this time.
Okay, thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, call your next witness, please.
The plaintiff calls Carson Durst.
Ms. Durst, you've been sworn already. Counsel, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself and spell your last name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Carson Durst, and that is spelled D-U-R-S-T.
Ms. Durst, what do you do for a living?
I'm currently the lead product developer for Terrace Greenery, which manufactures lawn products.
Did you have any previous employment before you worked at Terrace Greenery?
Yes, a while ago. In 2003 to 2006, I believe, I was with Lush Fertilizer on the research and development team. I first started out as an intern, but then after, I believe, 3 months, I was promoted to a product development engineer.
Please explain to the jury the circumstances of your being hired by Lush.
Well, I grew up best friends with Charles Doncourt, the son of the CEO, Blake Doncourt. I was very close with their family. You know, we went to the lake house together. We both went to Arizona State. And after I graduated with...
Ms. Durst, I believe there's an objection.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear an objection. Is there an objection?
Your Honor, I objected to relevance.
And what was the question again?
I asked Ms. Durst to explain to the jury the basis of her being hired by Lush.
I believe it goes to the witness's credibility, therefore it's relevant, and I will overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Durst, you were telling us about your relationship with Charles Doncourt. Would you like to explain on that a little bit more?
Yes, like I was saying, I was very close with their family. They were like the family I never had. And me and Charles both went to Arizona State, where I graduated with a bachelor's in chemical engineering. And that's after I graduated, I applied to and was hired by Lush Fertilizer.
You previously stated that you were a product development engineer. What does that job entail?
Well, my job was to develop different chemicals used for the lawns.
What was your biggest assignment when working at Lush Fertilizer?
My biggest assignment was definitely working to develop Drufo. The patented bonding agent Lush was developing at the time.
What was your first assignment with Drufo?
Well, for our first in-house study, I was tasked with researching one of the chemical compounds that comprise Drufo. And in my research, I discovered a study concluding that Drufo may be carcinogenic in rats.
Did you do anything with this study?
Yes, I had a lab notebook, which was the general way we documented what we did in the lab. And I documented that study in my notebook on, I believe, June 10th of 2003.
Please look at Exhibit 3, which
Your
should-
Honor, we have a time discrepancy.
Okay, what is the discrepancy?
She put 15 minutes left. At the time, we had 9 minutes and like 48 seconds.
Okay, why don't we, so we're talking about plaintiff's direct exam? And you
Yes, sir.
have
Yes,
15
Your Honor.
minutes left. Let's go with 17 minutes from this point forward.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that? We had a problem with the volume.
Yeah, so we had a time discrepancy. So from this point forward, there's 17 minutes left for plaintiff's direct.
Okay. No, it sounded like at 1 minute ago, there was 15 left, but they had only 9 left.
Oh, I'm
So-
sorry.
Yes,
I was
Your
looking
Honor.
online. So,
So if we were going to meet halfway in between, that would put us at like to have 12 left.
let's go with 12. 12 minutes left. Thanks for clarifying.
Ms. Durst, please direct your attention to Exhibit 3, which should be on the screen in front of you at any moment. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's a copy of the study I documented in my lab notebook.
How do you know?
Well, I found this study and I personally documented it.
Is Exhibit 3 a fair and accurate copy of that study you documented in your notebook?
Yes, I believe it is.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves for the admission of Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. I object to hearsay as well as best evidence.
And what is the response?
Your Honor, as to hearsay, we are not offering this for the truth of the matter, but rather the notice that it gave to Lush Fertilizer that their product was carcinogenic. Under
Okay.
jury instruction number
I
3,
understand, that's enough. I overrule the objection, it's admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
permission to publish, Your Honor.
Yes,
Ms. Durst, if you could direct your attention to the column labeled results and read the first sentence of the first paragraph until the phrase significant at the 0.01 level.
Objection, Your Honor. I call cumulative. Seeing as this is a timed event, I would caution them to not go into reading what has just been published to the jury.
we're not going to be
Response,
able
Your
to
Honor?
read. No need. It's admitted. You can ask the question, but don't just read the entire thing. If there's something to point out of particular note, please do that.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, if you could please read the first sentence of the first paragraph under the column results until the phrase significant at the 0.01 level.
Our results show a statistically significant dose-related increase of malignant tumor-bearing animals significant at the 0.01 level.
And if you could please direct your attention to the column labeled conclusions and read the first sentence of that first paragraph as well.
The results of this carcinogenicity bioassay, our first long-term carcinogenicity bioassay on C3N09P, demonstrate C3N09P's potential carcinogenicity at a dose level close to a normal monthly intake for humans in occupations involving frequent unprotected exposure to commercial fertilizers.
What is C3N09P?
It's the chemical formula for Drufo.
Getting back to what you documented in your lab notebook, did anyone routinely review those?
Yes, our product manager, Jerry Langley, did.
What would typically happen after those were reviewed?
Well, Jerry would compile the lab's findings and include them in a report to senior management.
Did you ever hear anything about this report again?
Yes, in 2000, or I apologize, in September of 2003, Lush Management told us they were going to do another in-house study relating to whether or not Drufo is carcinogenic in humans.
How did they inform you of that study?
In an email.
Please direct your attention to Exhibit 4, which should be on the screen in front of you momentarily. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's a copy of the email I received from Jerry Langley concerning the second study on Drufo.
How do you know?
I received this email and I read it at the time.
Is Exhibit 4 a fair and accurate copy of that email you received from Ms. Langley?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves for the admission of Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Permission to publish?
Yes.
Ms. Durst, if you look at the top of this email, you will see a list of recipients. Is there anyone whose name is on that list who is in court today?
Yes, Blake Doncourt's name is on the list, and I believe he's here in court today, yes.
Turning to the contents of the email, if you could please read the first sentence of the second paragraph.
Following our lab's June Drufo study, concerns have arisen regarding generalized findings of potential carcinogenic qualities identified in samples produced during a period early in the year.
Did you do anything in response to this email?
I just got to work on the assignment that I was given.
Were you given any specific instructions from management?
Yes, the lab was encouraged to document data in a manner that supported the company's hypothesis.
Was a second study of Drufo ever actually conducted?
Yes, it was.
What happened next with regard to this second study?
We had a meeting with Jerry Langley and Alex Monroe, who is an upper level manager.
What was the topic of this meeting?
It was on our conclusions regarding Drufo being toxic.
Were there any specific conclusions presented to Ms. Langley and Alex Monroe?
Yes, a scientist expressed concerns that Drufo could
Action, Your Honor, hearsay.
Overruled.
You were telling us about the concerns of a scientist, Ms. Durst?
Yes, the scientist said that Drufo could possibly contain a carcinogen and that it could be linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Was there any response from either of the two managers?
Alex Monroe just told us to keep it in the walls until we figure out what we're doing.
Did Ms. Langley create a report of the second study after it was finished?
Yes, she did.
Did you ever see a copy of that report?
I did.
What were the findings?
It said that further analysis is required before we're able to make any conclusions regarding Drufo causing.
And best evidence.
Overruled.
What were the findings of that report, Ms. Durst?
That basically there needed to be more research done in order to make any conclusions that Drufo could be harmful or carcinogenic.
Based on your participation in this research, was this finding accurate?
No, it was incredibly misleading, and it was obvious that data had been excluded from the study.
Did the report say anything else?
Yes, it recommended baking Drufo as part of the production process in order to fully eliminate the possibility that Drufo could be considered carcinogenic.
To your knowledge, was this recommendation taken?
No, it was not. And honestly, if it was, we wouldn't be here today in court.
After this report telling the company to bake Drufo came out, what was your experience at the company?
I began to receive bad performance reviews, and I was even put on a performance improvement plan. It appeared to me that Jerry Langley had some sort of vendetta against me because of my concerns that Drufo could be carcinogenic.
What did you do then?
I found a job with Terry's Greenery.
Finally, Ms. Durst, to your knowledge, did Lush ever take any steps to inform the public of any risks to using their products?
No, they didn't, and I really wish they did.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Before we go to cross-exam, I have a question for the timekeepers. How much time is left for direct exam in the plaintiff's case?
5 minutes and 5 minutes, 6 seconds, Your Honor.
Okay.
I believe
And-
there was a mishap somewhere because I do believe that the plaintiff should have more time.
How much more time?
I would say 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up at the end of the direct. There was a miscommunication. I just meant that there was like a 16-second time discrepancy when she said 15 minutes left.
Okay. So as I remember, we went with 12 minutes instead of 15. And currently you show 5 minutes and
6 seconds, Your Honor.
5 minutes and 6 seconds. Let's do this because I see from the witness list that the plaintiff has one more witness to do.
Yes, Your Honor.
So let's, is it consistent if plaintiff has 8 minutes of direct exam time left? Is that consistent with the timekeepers?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Okay, so at this point, plaintiff has 8 minutes left for direct exam in their case. And you can decide when the cross-exam is over, you can decide whether you want to use any of that for redirect with this witness or not. So I just want to make
Thank
sure.
you, Your
we know
Honor.
where we're at.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-exam.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Durst, you've worked at Terrace Greenery since 2006,
Yes, that's correct.
and your application got accepted before you departed from Lush Fertilizer.
Well, I could see no future for me at Lush Fertilizer, so I applied to Terrace Greenery because I knew that, my career had no future at Lush Fertilizer.
Is that a yes or a no, Ms. Durst?
That's a yes.
And this broke your non-compete with Lush Fertilizer.
When I got the job at Lush Fertilizer, I had completely forgotten that I had signed a disclosure agreement. I mean, I was signing so many papers and I don't read the fine print. I don't really think anyone does. But we came to a settlement where I waited 6 months before I started at Terry's Greenery.
I would like to ask, I'm asking yes or no questions. If you can answer with a yes or a no, that would be wonderful. So did you or did you not break your non-compete with Lush Fertilizer by going to Terrace Greenery?
I believe I did, but at the time I'd completely forgotten. And so I didn't mean to.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
And that ended in a lawsuit, correct?
We came to an agreement. Yes, there was a lawsuit, but we came to an agreement through that.
And that delayed your employment with Terrace Greenery for 6 months?
Yeah, it was the longest 6 months of my life.
And you applied there because you knew you were going to be fired.
I had been raising my concerns at Lush Fertilizer that Drufo could be toxic. And because of that, I was receiving bad performance reviews, and I believe Jerry Langley was pushing me out of the company. And so I knew that my career had no future at Lush Fertilizer. So that's why I applied at Terrace Greenery.
And you felt betrayed by Blake Doncourt by the end?
Well, I had considered him as a mentor. I felt like he was a second father. I grew up with his son and in their family, and I did feel betrayed because he wasn't listening to me. But I don't have any ill will towards him. I have put it behind me. But ultimately, I had to look out for my career.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
And this was helped by the fact that he told you to grow up and do your job, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Overruled. Goes to the credibility of the witness.
Would you like me to re-ask the question, Ms. Durst?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You felt betrayed because he told you to grow up and do your job?
At the time, he was currently going through a divorce with his wife, and I felt that he had some anger issues. He got angry at many people during that time, but I don't hold anything against him.
Ms. Durst, I asked a yes or no question. Will you please answer with a yes or no?
Could you repeat the question?
You felt betrayed because he said, grow up and do your job, correct?
Well, at the time, maybe I did, but I don't hold anything against him, and I don't have any ill will towards him.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
And you went to him because of a bad performance review, yes or no?
I apologize. I don't think I can answer that in a yes or no question. I was receiving multiple bad performance reviews because I was raising concerns. So that is why I went to speak with him.
So that's a yes, correct?
Not necessarily.
And Your Honor, objection, the witness is being unresponsive.
Well, I think the witness needs to answer to the best of her ability. If she can answer it yes or no, then please do so. If you can't, keep your answer brief, but answer to the best of your ability.
Yes, Your Honor. Moving on, you didn't go to Blake about bad performance reviews once, you did it multiple times, correct?
Well, I went to him initially because I wasn't being treated fairly. And then when it continued to happen and he didn't do anything about it, I did go and speak to him again. And that was close to when I was terminated.
And the first time you went, Blake Doncourt refused to intervene, correct?
Yes. He said that he didn't see there was anything wrong happening, but I knew that I wasn't being treated fairly.
Moving on, he even brought up how many qualified applicants he overlooked just to hire you when he talked to you, correct?
Well, I mean, I can't necessarily speak to his reasons for hiring me, but I assure you I was qualified for the job. I mean, I even was promoted after 3 months.
Did Blake Doncourt tell you about how many qualified applicants he overlooked to hire you?
He did. Those are his words, I believe.
But you still believed you performed at a higher level than all of your, performed at a higher level than all of your peers?
I wouldn't say that I was performed at a higher level above every single one of my peers. But I do believe that, I was doing my best in my position, and I was promoted to a product development engineer only 3 months after being hired as an intern.
And this all led to you applying to the biggest competitor of Lush Fertilizer, Terra's Greenery?
I'm confused by your question.
Everything that I've discussed in Cross led to you going to Terra's Greenery?
Well, I applied to Terra's Greenery because it was a fertilizer company and I had experience from Lush Fertilizer. But overall, I wanted to work for a company that would value me as an employee.
And that was all so you could get back at Blake Doncourt?
Well, I didn't apply to Terra's Greenery to get back at Blake Doncourt. I knew that it would probably upset him, but I also knew that at the end of the day, I had to look out for myself. And I knew that I could not stay working at Lush Fertilizer with the way they were treating me.
Didn't apply at Terra's Greenery to get back at Mr. Doncourt?
That wasn't my main reason for applying to Terra's Greenery. I knew it would probably upset him, but.
But you said this in your affidavit, that it would really get.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper use of a witness statement. Witness statements can only be used to impeach or refresh. And if opposing counsel is attempting to impeach my witness, my apologies, then he needs to show her witness statement.
Your Honor, if I may.
Counsel, that's okay. You may ask her if she made that statement, if she remembers making that statement in her affidavit.
Yes, Your Honor. You remember making the statement that would really get Blake's goat, did you not?
I do remember making that statement in my witness statement, yes.
And saying to get at or really get someone's goat is to aggravate them and get back at them, correct?
wouldn't say that. I mean, I knew it would upset Blake Doncourt, but he wasn't listening to my concerns.
And that's why you're here today, to get back at Mr. Doncourt.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Overruled.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, thank you.
And that's why you are here today in court, to get back at Mr. Doncourt.
I am not here in court to get back at Mr. Doncourt. I am here to express my concerns. I don't feel that Drufo is safe for humans, and I want to make sure that people know that and people are aware of that.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Would the plaintiff like to do any redirect or not?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ms. Durst, why were you fired from Lush Fertilizer?
I was fired from Lush Fertilizer because I was expressing my concerns that Drufo could hurt humans, and really I was threatening their profits.
And why did you apply for a job at Terrace Greenery?
I applied to Terrace Greenery because I had experience in the fertilizer industry from Lush Fertilizer. And I also wanted to work for a company that would value me as an employee and that would treat me well.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Plaintiff, please call your third witness.
The plaintiff calls Dakota Weirs. May I have a brief time check, Your Honor?
Yes.
You have 7 minutes and 24 seconds left.
Thank you.
Ms. Weirs, you've already been sworn. Counsel, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name.
Good afternoon. My name is Dakota Weirs, and Weirs is spelled Weirs.
Ms. Weirs, you are the plaintiff in this lawsuit. You are suing Lush Fertilizer for damages. Why?
Because using their fertilizer caused me to develop my non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
How has your cancer changed your life?
I used to be an active member in the community. I would volunteer at local homeless shelters by serving food, washing dishes, helping any way I could. I was a member of the National Honor Society and president of my school. Now, I can barely help around my own house.
Has your life changed in other ways because of cancer?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for narrative.
Overruled.
Yes, the greatest joy in my life was my piano playing. My grandpa gave my parents a grand piano, and it just became my safe place where I would play with my toys and build forts. My grandpa taught me how to play. I began to write my own songs. It was a very sad day when my grandpa died 13 years ago. That piano became my lifeline to him. It changed me for the better.
What do you mean by it changed you for the better?
I began to take piano lessons, and soon it became my absolute life. I would spend all my time either practicing or studying musical theory, and soon I began to win competitions. Before I knew it, I was accepted into Juilliard, the greatest musical conservatory in the world. My dreams came true.
Did you go to Juilliard?
No. Lush Fertilizer has literally crushed this dream. Because of my non-Hodgkin lymphoma, I can no longer sit for long periods of time. In fact, this trial is very exhausting for me. Taking away the piano is like taking away my grandfather all over again.
How was your non-Hodgkin lymphoma caused?
It's caused by environmental conditions, including chemicals.
How has cancer affected you physically?
I have swollen lymph nodes, which are horribly painful. I also have frequent chills, chest pains, constant fatigue, shortness of breath, and I bruise very easily.
Has cancer affected you emotionally?
Yes, I have horrible bouts of depression, and I'm in constant fear of dying.
Has cancer affected you in your ability to work?
Yes, despite how active I used to be in the community, I held a job since I was 14, putting myself through school. Now, I can't even get off my couch.
Tell the jury about your work.
I worked at a locally owned landscaping company called Haven Landscaping. I just loved the feeling of the dirt in my hands and the wind on my face. It was just so satisfying.
What did you do for Haven Landscaping?
I would spread seed and fertilizer because I was too young to work behind the heavy machinery like lawnmowers and weed whackers.
We believe that the defendant will try to convince the jury it was your own fault you developed your cancer because you didn't wear protective clothing at your work. How do you
Argumentative.
Overruled.
How do you respond to this claim, Ms. Weirs?
My boss told everyone to wear protective clothing and a face covering when using the chemicals, but he never even said why. And most of the time it was incredibly hot outside and it became absolutely miserable to work in weather like that with clothing like he wanted us to wear.
Were you ever warned that the fertilizer you were using could cause cancer?
No, but I wish I would have been.
You previously stated that you believe Lush fertilizer is the cause of your cancer. Could you tell the jury about your progression with non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Before I left for Juilliard, I began to feel so sick all of the time. I lost massive amounts of weight, yet my abdomen would swell to twice its size. I had swollen lymph nodes. I was almost constantly depressed. Soon my doctors diagnosed me with non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Please continue.
We had no idea how someone my age.
Narrative.
Overruled.
We had no idea how someone my age, so young, could even get this horrible disease. Then one day, I was sitting on the couch because I was so depressed I couldn't even get up. I saw this news story that said Lush fertilizer knew its products could cause cancer.
Best evidence.
Response.
Your Honor, as this news report was not provided in the materials of mock trial, this is the best evidence.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 1002, an original writing, recording, or photograph is required in order to prove its content, regardless of whether the writing, recording, or photograph was provided in the case materials. And since that has not been provided, it should be stricken from the record as it is inadmissible.
But this is in the witness's statement, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
The objection will be overruled.
You were talking about this news story, Ms. Weirs?
I saw this news story that said Lush fertilizer knew its products could cause cancer, and they lied about it and they kept it a secret.
Did that news story cause you to do anything?
Yes, I had remembered that I'd used Lush fertilizer at my landscaping job. I immediately called my dad. I also called my old boss, who was able to get me a few pictures of an old Lush fertilizer packaging label.
Please look at Exhibit 1, which should be on the screen in front of you in a moment. Excuse me. Do you recognize Exhibit 1?
Yes.
What is it?
It is an old Lush fertilizer packaging label.
How do you know?
I worked with this label at my landscaping job, and this is what appeared on my phone when my boss sent it to me.
Is Exhibit 1 a fair and accurate copy of the old Lush fertilizer packaging label?
Yes.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves for the admission of Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1, it's admitted. You may publish it.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, does this packaging label warn you about any carcinogenic properties?
Not once.
Now let's discuss your relationship with your twin, Skylar Weirs. We know that she will be testifying for the defendant. Were you raised together?
Yes, Skylar and I were in almost every activity together except my landscaping job. She's allergic to grass.
Did Skylar develop cancer as well?
No, she did not.
Do you have an opinion on your twin's character for truthfulness?
Skylar isn't very truthful, and to be honest, she'll write anything for the right price.
Finally, Ms. Weirs, do you know what the future holds for you?
No, and honestly, I am so scared. I have no idea if I am going to live or die from this. My doctors don't even know what's going to happen to me. Hearing in this trial that I have a 72% chance that I'm going to even live 5 years is absolutely terrifying.
What are you asking of this jury?
Please don't let Lush do this to anyone else.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Weirs, I understand this is a very difficult topic for you to discuss, but I just have a few questions for you. Is that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Now, you testified earlier that you worked for a company called Haven Landscaping since you were about 14 years old. Is that right?
Yes, I started when I was 14.
And while you worked at Haven Landscaping, you were primarily responsible for spreading seed and fertilizer, right?
I was too young to work with the lawnmowers and weed whackers, so yes.
Now, you believe that Lush fertilizer caused your cancer because there was no warning or recommendation on the packaging. Is that right?
Yes, I do believe that this was the cause of my cancer. Drufo was.
Now, Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to have my co-counsel screen share what has already been admitted as Exhibit 1. Ms. Weirs, if you could please refer to it. Just 1 minute, please, Ms. Weirs. Now, on this packaging, there is something called a user safety recommendation. Is that correct?
Yes, there is.
And one of those recommendations states to, quote, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin, right?
Yes, I did that sometimes, but not all the time.
And in addition, the recommendations state to utilize a respirator or medical grade face mask.
Yes, it does.
But while you were working at Haven Landscaping, you chose not to wear a mask, right?
I was 14. I had no idea that I might have cancer and be dying at age 20.
I understand this is a very emotional topic for you to discuss, Ms. Weirs, and I really understand your pain, but you did not choose to wear a face mask while working with this chemical, is that right?
Not all the time, no, just like everyone else.
Because, you know, you really enjoy the wind on your face.
Of course, I love the outdoors.
Right, but when you worked outdoors, it was often really too hot for you to wear a mask, right?
Of course, it was absolutely excruciating to wear stuff like what they're recommending here.
Now, while working at your job, your boss always told you to cover your face when working with chemicals, right?
Yes, he told everyone else as well, but no one ever really did that because it was so hot outside.
Right, but you and your coworkers chose to not wear that protective face mask, right?
No, not all the time. And again, I wasn't thinking I would have cancer at age 20.
Ms. Weirs, I really understand that this is an emotional topic for you, but I just need to ask these questions for the jury. Now, Lush Fertilizer is not the only brand of fertilizer you used while working at Haven Landscaping, is that right?
No, there were a few others.
Lush Fertilizer was among several other fertilizers and lawn chemicals, right?
That's what I just said. There were some other ones.
And while you used the fertilizers, you chose to not wear a face mask, right?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Your Honor,
I'm going to overrule the objection. It may have been asked and answered, but it can be answered quickly. Let's move on.
Yes, Your Honor.
And while using these chemicals, you chose not to wear a face mask, right?
Not all the time, no.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
As I understand, plaintiff has, I think, 20 seconds. Do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I believe they have 9 seconds remaining.
Okay,
In that case, no redirect, Your Honor.
one question?
Your Honor, I do not believe there's time for that.
Okay, I trust your judgment. So thank you very much. Does the plaintiff rest?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Defense, please call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Dr. Devin Williams.
And while we're doing that, we need to take the share screen down.
Sorry, Your Honor.
That's okay. It's not a big deal. Just want to make sure everything runs smoothly. Dr. Williams, you've been sworn. Counsel, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Dr. Devin Williams, Williams.
You work as a toxicologist for Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. Is that right?
Yes, I'm actually the lead toxicologist of the research and development labs at Lush.
How long have you worked for Lush Fertilizer Incorporated?
I worked there for roughly 10 years, 7 of those years as the lead toxicologist.
And you know, a lead toxicologist needs a lot of education. What sort of education do you have with regarding your expertise?
Well, I earned my bachelor's, master's, PhD from Colorado State University, Fort Collins. And then I also did a specialized post-pharmacotoxicology program at the University of Utah.
And you know, being a lead toxicologist requires a lot of certification. What sort of certification do you have as a toxicologist?
Well, I am verified in the states of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming in a variety of toxicology.
Your Honor, at this time, pursuant to Rule 702, I move to enter Dr. Devin Williams as an expert tenured in toxicology, as well as an emphasis on pharmacotoxicology, as I've shown that my witness's knowledge, expertise, certification, and training has been shown.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
She is so admitted as an expert.
Now, Dr. Devin Williams, during your career at Lush Fertilizer, you helped Drufo, is that correct?
Yes, I helped develop Drufo for the past 10 years.
Could you explain what Drufo is?
Drufo is a non-nitrate that reduces the pollution of nitrogen as a bonding agent used in Lush's fertilizer.
Now, what was Drufo specifically developed for?
It was created as an ingredient to prevent pollution of nitrogen, making it quite a revolutionary.
So what makes Drufo such a revolutionary product?
Well, since Drufo binds the ingredients in luscious fertilizer to the grass or other flora and plants, this results in less fertilizer being sprayed, which reduces the pollution.
How did some regulation agencies react to this revolutionary product?
In the EU, it was met with a roadblock.
And what sort of roadblock do you mean by that?
There was a initiative where, unfortunately, in lab settings was produced a incidental amount of nitrogen.
Now, why did Drufo not pass these tests with incidental nitrates?
Since it was tested in a lab setting, you can just get any amount of nitrates just with any other regular fertilizer. However, this is unrealistic in real life settings.
Now, was this nitrate accumulation the only issue that the EU had?
Yes, that's the only reason we have problems with.
So now I'd like to move on to studies done on your product, Drufo. You were present here when Dr. Casey Rogers testified about their study today.
Indeed, I was.
Did you formulate an opinion about that study?
I did.
Now, before we go into your opinion for that, what factors did you rely upon when formulating your opinion on this study?
Through my research of toxicology as well as research with Drufo itself, I formulated this opinion, yes.
And research with your methods and your training, are those reliable factors that most people in your field would rely upon?
Of course they are.
All right. So what is that opinion on Dr. Rogers' study?
Dr. Rogers' study lacks validity and reliability because of fundamental mistakes that he made.
Okay, so I'd like to talk about each of those points that you brought up in your opinion. So let's first start with validity. Why does Dr. Rogers' study lack validity?
All the fundamental mistake that Dr. Roger makes relating to validity is that in layman terms, it's comparing oranges to apples, or in our case, Dr. Roger's study compares those who seldom use fertilizer to those who excessively use fertilizer, such as gardeners or landscapers. These people have completely different lifestyles.
Now, why is the difference between these lifestyles important to validity?
Differences in lifestyles leads to different environmental exposures.
Now, I'd like to bring up something that Dr. Casey Rogers said on their redirect examination earlier today. You were present when they were under that direct examination?
Yes, I was.
Now, their opposing counsel asked if variability in the study affects validity, and they said no. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely not. With any basic science and creating studies, you can only have one uncontrolled variability, and the rest has to be controlled to have a study that has the accurate result without having any biases or flaws affect those results.
Okay, so now I'd like to move into your second point in your opinion, reliability. How does Dr. Rogers' study lack reliability?
It lacks reliability since, first off, it hasn't been replicated, nor has it been peer-reviewed.
Why is replicability so important?
Replicability is important because you want to identify an effect rather than possibilities of chances. So additionally, having only one study can include a multitude of flaws and biases that can occur.
So Dr. Williams, in your expert opinion, how valid is Dr. Rogers' study?
Dr. Rogers' study is not valid whatsoever. The results are completely miscalculated as it's comparing two completely different environmental exposures.
And in your expert opinion, how reliable is that study?
Well, the study lacks reliability, and since it hasn't been replicated, this allows for, as I said previously, any flaws or bias to be present.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. I have multiple questions for you as well. Let's start with the premise that you have, in your own words, a financial bias in the outcome of this case, don't you?
I do, but I believe anyone in this courthouse today has some type of financial bias.
In other words, if this jury believes your testimony, your company will benefit financially, won't it?
I don't quite understand your question, counsel. Are you able to reword it in a different manner?
Certainly. If Lush Fertilizer wins this trial, you and Lush Fertilizer would benefit financially, wouldn't you?
Guess so.
Furthermore, you are the Director of Toxicology Research and Development at Lush, correct?
Yes, I am the lead.
That means it's your department that tries to make sure Drufo isn't toxic, correct?
That's correct.
And you have, in your own words, the inherent responsibility to consider the why and if about Lush's products, don't you?
Yes, that is part of my job.
However, if this jury were to find that Drufo causes cancer, that means it's you and your department that made a mistake. Isn't that true?
Yes, but through my 10 years of working with Drufo, we haven't found any of these risk possibility or factors.
But you have a lot at risk in this trial, don't you?
In terms of what type of risk?
Are you asking me?
Yes, to clarify that question more. because I'm not sure what you mean by the risk.
I'll move on. The European Union has banned Drufo, hasn't it?
Yes, under the nitrate directive, which I addressed in my previous testimony.
Dr. Williams, you say the European Union's ban is because of nitrates. Yet you also say Drufo is revolutionary because it reduces nitrates, don't you?
Yes, it reduces, but when the European
And
Union.
yeah, Dr. Williams, the
Your Honor.
European Union.
Your Honor, I ask that my witness be allowed to finish the question.
Agreed. Dr. Williams, you may finish your last answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, under the ban of the European, the Drufo produced a incidental nitrate accumulation. However, these are realistic in the real life environmental settings. So although it reduces the pollution of nitrogen, it doesn't make it 100% preventative.
However, Dr. Williams, the European Union determined this, which means Drufo isn't so environmentally perfect, is it?
Not in a lab created setting. However, Lush Fertilizer and me are always trying to improve our products.
Now, this European Union ban extends to many nations outside of the European Union, doesn't it?
It does.
And that's because many countries don't have the regulatory structure in place to make their own assessments, correct?
Yes.
And your company hopes to get that ban reversed, correct?
Yes, as I said, through our Lush Fertilizer and our research and development labs, we are always trying to improve our products and make it better.
And your company is creating this study because you believe the European Union should not have banned Drufo, correct?
Yes.
Therefore, you believe the European Union was wrong, don't you?
Yes, but we are still further developing Drufo to reverse the claims of the European Union ban.
So you will agree with me that sometimes regulatory agencies make the wrong decision, don't they?
Not quite, but the test was made in a lab clinical setting, but unlike the real life environmental were.
Now, your company hopes to get this ban reversed, correct?
Yes, I've stated numerous times.
However, if this jury were to find that Drufo causes cancer, that would create a whole host of new bureaucratic roadblocks with the European Union, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would affect it.
Now, because of the European Union's ban, you just decided to take out Drufo and your products sold in the EU, correct?
That's correct.
And you could have just taken Drufo out of the products sold in America also, couldn't you?
I believe this is outside the scope of my affidavit. If you'd like me to answer it, I can elaborate.
Please answer my question.
Are you able to restate it, please?
Certainly. You could have just taken Drufo out of the products sold in America as well, couldn't you?
Yes, but since we are trying to make Lush Fertilizer produce less nitrogen, we are still trying to make Drufo an effective ingredient.
So you didn't do that, did you?
No.
Now let's talk about your involvement with Drufo. Lush's CEO, Blake Doncourt, told you to keep Drufo products cost effective. Isn't that true?
Yes, as we want to make it cost effective both for the company and as well as our consumers.
And you don't have any reason to disagree that if Lush Fertilizer had baked Drufo, all risk of cancer would have been eliminated, do you?
This is outside the scope of my affidavit. However you want me to answer, I can.
Dr. Williams, you are the head of toxicology research and development at Lush. You are aware that baking Drufo would eliminate all risk of cancer, aren't you?
Objection, Your Honor. Badgering. My witness has stated that this is not in her affidavit and or within her statement. I feel like it's badgering this witness.
Okay. You offered to answer if the questioner would like you to answer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Would you like her to answer?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please answer.
Well, with my research and development, we solely improving the factors and ingredients relating to truffaut. And as for baking, since that won't be as cost effective for the consumers nor us as the company, and this was a small sliver that baking would do, so we didn't further go ahead with this process.
Dr. Williams, you are not answering my question. My question was, you don't have any reason to disagree that if Lush Fertilizer had baked truffaut, all risk of cancer would have been eliminated, correct?
I'm going to object to the same objection badgering. My witness has just answered this exact question with being prompted by yourself as well as opposing counsel.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection. Please move on to another question.
Yes, Your Honor. Finally, Dr. Williams, you cannot tell this jury that truffaut doesn't cause cancer, can you?
Oh, not in my witness testimony statement that I wrote. However, through my 10 years of research and development, and since this question is outside of that scope of affidavit, I can say that through those 10 years, I haven't seen how truffaut can cause cancer. It's non-carcinogenic.
Dr. Williams, if you would please turn to your witness statement, which should be on the screen in front of you. And whoops, sorry. Is this your signature here at the bottom?
Indeed it is.
And right above it, don't you say, I have carefully reviewed this statement. It is true and accurate, and it includes everything I know of that could be relevant to the events I discussed?
Yes.
Now turning to lines, 76 through 77, you state, why am I not just saying it doesn't cause cancer? Because that's not how science works. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I may briefly, I'd object to improper impeachment.
Well, it's already been asked and answered. So if you have any redirect, now's the time.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Devin Williams, you were asked on cross-examination about the European Union's nitrate directive. Could you elaborate on your thoughts on the nitrate directive with concerns to truffaut?
Yes, when the European Union were testing our product and ingredient of truffaut, they tested this in a clinical lab setting, which then through that setting, it produced an incidental accumulation of nitrate. However, compared to the real world and real life environmental settings, this isn't realistic, and our product truffaut would be reducing nitrogen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, counsel. Defense, please call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Skylar Weirs to the stand.
Ms. Weirs, you've already been sworn. Counsel, you may proceed.
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
My name is Skylar Weirs, Weirs.
And Ms. Weirs, what is your occupation?
I'm an agricultural technology researcher.
Can you explain what you mean by agricultural technology researcher?
Yes, I mean that I've been researching and writing articles about modern agritech.
And what is agritech?
Agritech focuses on the development and application of agricultural advancements to increase
Objection, Your Honor, improper opinion.
Well, I don't think I don't think an opinion has been asked for yet. I think it's just a description of what agritech means. So I will overrule the objection.
If you could, Ms. Weirs, just start from the beginning of that for the jury.
Yes. Agritech focuses on the development and application of agricultural advancements to create agricultural efficiency and food safety.
And could you describe for us your familiarity with the topic of agritech?
Yes, I spent almost a year researching agritech companies by reviewing publications written by those companies.
And what other research did you do?
During that time, I also researched studies referenced in those publications and information maintained by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture.
And how does this research intersect with this lawsuit today?
I researched fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides that have several well-known carcinogens such as nitrates, glyphosate, and arsenic. This included research into Drufo, an ingredient of lush fertilizer.
And have you published any articles based off of this research you've done?
Yeah. Yes, I have.
And could you describe these publications that you've written based off of your research?
I've written a series of articles on modern agritech. Specifically, I have written for Rational Magazine.
And Ms. Weirs, what is Rationalist Magazine?
Rational Magazine is a science education advocacy quarterly publication.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, based upon her knowledge or experience, I am tendering Skylar Weirs as a qualified expert witness in the field of modern agritech to render an opinion on the potential impacts of safety of pesticides, herbicides, and other agritech products.
Any objection?
No objection to the expertise, Your Honor, as long as it stays within the scope of agritech.
Okay, the witness will be admitted as an expert in modern agritech and its impacts on safety. You may proceed.
Now, Ms. Weirs, we talked earlier about your research into agritech. Could you tell us more about the chemicals that you have researched?
I researched a variety of fertilizers and pesticides used to promote plant and crop growth.
And what do these fertilizers and pesticides do?
Their job is to promote plant growth and kill undesirable organisms like fungi, bacteria, or insects that threaten the health of the plant or crop.
Okay, so these chemicals are designed to help plants, but are they harmful?
Well, obviously they're harmful. They are defined as poison. Virtually every fertilizer and pesticide has several well-known carcinogens, but on the whole, they are safer than they used to be.
And could you give us an example of a technology that helps fertilizers in this way?
Well, a very good example of a chemical that helps fertilizers is Drufo.
And Ms. Weirs, what is Drufo?
Drufo is a chemical developed by Lush Fertilizer to promote adhesion of the fertilizer to plants and crops.
And are there any other benefits of Drufo that we should be aware of?
I guess there's one more Drufo benefit I should mention. Drufo is an effective pesticide, so Lush does not need to add pesticides like glyphosate and arsenic to its fertilizers.
Since you mentioned glyphosate and arsenic, let's talk about how some chemicals in fertilizers might harm humans. What did your research reveal about links between chemical use in fertilizers and cancer in humans?
We'll start with arsenic. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified arsenic definitely as a carcinogen to humans.
Okay, that's arsenic. What about glyphosate?
Glyphosate is similar, but not as bad. The International Agency of Research on Cancer has classified it as a possible carcinogen.
And finally, let's talk about Drufo. What did your research reveal about Drufo's risk as a carcinogen?
Well, in all of my research, I did not—
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of expertise. Ms. Weirs is not a medical doctor and has been admitted as an expert in modern agritech, not in any sort of medical field.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
As Your Honor, as my witness was entered to give an opinion on the potential impacts and safety of pesticides, herbicides, and other agritech products, she is 100% staying within the bounds of her expertise and is just testifying to that.
I will overrule, excuse me, I will overrule the objection. She was admitted as an expert in modern agritech including the impacts on safety. And the fact that she's not a medical doctor doesn't disqualify her under Rule 702. It goes to the weight of her testimony, but not to the admissibility. So the objection is overruled.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
I believe that under the pretrial rulings, Ms. Weirs was to be entered as an expert in modern agritech, and that is what I heard her be admitted as.
Well, she was admitted on modern agritech, including the impacts on safety. So the objection is overruled.
Ms. Weirs, as we were talking about before, what did your research reveal any benefits to DRUFA regarding carcinogens and their health impacts on humans?
No, in all my research, I didn't find a single study that established with any level of certainty a causal link between DRUFO exposure and cancer in humans.
And what about the health impacts on humans?
As I noted, DRUFO obviates the need for Lush to add glyphosate and arsenic to its fertilizer, which removes one carcinogen and one potential carcinogen from the company's fertilizer.
And Ms. Weirs, based on the factors that you have researched on DRUFO, as well as your expert opinion, do you think it is possible to definitively say that Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by exposure to DRUFO?
No, as I stated, my research found no definitive link between DRUFO and cancer in humans. And there are at least 2 chemicals used in other fertilizers that are more closely linked to cancer.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Let's talk about family now.
Okay.
What is your relationship with the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs?
Dakota and I are twins. We are siblings.
And so to be clear, Ms. Weirs, you're testifying against your sibling?
I am. Reluctantly.
And Ms. Weirs, why are you so reluctant to testify against your own sibling?
I love Dakota and I am very sad that she has cancer, but I'm concerned that Dakota's blame is misguided and misdirected.
And what do you mean that Dakota's blame is misguided?
I mean that, in my opinion, Dakota is blaming for her illness the one product, DRUFO, that actually reduces the need for repeated exposure to harmful chemicals. It makes more sense that Dakota's non-Hodgkin lymphoma may have been caused by their exposure during landscaping work to other products that contain known carcinogens.
Is this opinion one that you developed based off of your research and analysis of agritech?
Yes, my opinion is based thoroughly on my research into agritech.
And were the conclusions you reached developed in a manner consistent with methods used by others in your field of expertise?
Yes, I believe my methods are consistent with others who share my expertise.
And finally, Ms. Weirs, in your opinion, based on the agritech research you conducted and based on the testimony you heard earlier today in court from Dakota in this trial, where might Dakota's blame for their non-Hodgkin lymphoma best be targeted?
Well, I hesitate to point fingers, but in my opinion, Haven Landscaping, where Dakota worked for so many years, should not have allowed its—
Objection, Your Honor, outside the expertise.
Response?
Your Honor, as this question clearly stated, based upon her agritech research that she conducted and based upon the testimony that was heard today in trial, my witness is able to form an opinion based off of her expertise, especially because we are indeed talking about the effects on the body. And as she was entered in as an expert in that case, I do believe that my witness can render an opinion.
And what,
Your Honor,
what precisely is the question that's pending?
Is that where, based off of the modern agritech research that she conducted, as well as the testimony from Dakota and from the testimony within this trial, where might Dakota's blame for their non-Hodgkin lymphoma best be targeted?
I'm going to sustain the objection because I think that goes beyond expert testimony and gets into the realm of telling the fact finder, the jury, how to decide. So the objection is sustained.
Ms. Weirs, how do you feel about the diagnosis of your sibling?
Well,
objection, Your Honor, relevance. Ms. Weir's
I think it goes to the witness's credibility. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Ms. Weirs.
Obviously, it's heartbreaking. You would never want to see a family member in these conditions, but working with harmful chemicals and without protective gear is obviously going to have a effect.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs, for your testimony. I know this must be hard on you and your family. At this time, Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay, thank you, counsel. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. I have several questions for you as well. Let's begin with your background and experience. You are 20 years old?
Yes.
And your only qualification to testify to this jury is that you spent time researching publications, correct?
Yes, I spent many hours and hard work over the past year to conduct these studies.
Unlike our expert, Dr. Rogers, you never ran any tests on Drufo, did you?
No, I didn't, but her studies weren't conclusive either.
Unlike our expert, Dr. Rogers, you didn't use a mass spectrometer to study the chemical composition of Drufo, correct?
No, I did not study. My job was specifically to research, not study.
And unlike our expert, Dr. Rogers, you don't have a bachelor's degree, a master's, or a PhD, do you?
No, I don't.
And you don't have any professional work experience outside of freelance writing for an advocacy magazine.
If I may. I believe that this questioning all should have been brought up in terms of talking about my witness being entered as an expertise, as this leans towards a voir dire instead of a cross-examination. I do not believe this is the proper time and place for this questioning to be brought up.
Well, it could have been brought up in voir dire, but it's also proper subject for cross-examination. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Let me ask that question again. You don't have any professional work experience outside of freelance writing for an advocacy magazine, correct?
No, I do not, but I did spend a lot of time doing this, so I consider myself pretty educated over this topic.
You believe that outside of the USDA and the NASDA, no one in the whole world has the overall perspective you do on agritech, correct?
That's not my exact wording, but to the gist, yes.
But you do believe that you have one of the best opinions on agritech, right?
Well, yes, I spent a year doing this. I read many studies.
But you have never worked in agritech, have you?
No, I have not. But considering that I spent a year researching all these studies over and over.
Ms. Weirs, I have limited time here, so I would appreciate if you could keep your questions or your answers to a yes or no.
I should be able to explain my opinions if it's not an exact yes or no answer.
Well, let's back up a minute. I do agree you need to answer the question that's asked. So please repeat your question, counsel.
You've never worked in agritech, have you?
No.
In fact, you currently work at Applebee's as a part-time server, right?
Yes, that's part of my job. The other part is working for the newspaper.
You did hear Dr. Rogers' testimony in court today that people with a prolonged exposure to Drufo have a 1,000% greater risk of cancer, correct?
Yes, it's just like any other fertilizer. Like I stated in my direct that every fertilizer.
Ms. Weirs, I would.
Okay, time out a minute, counsel and witness. We can only have one person speak at a time. Counsel, I'd like you to repeat your question, and I would like an answer that's responsive to the question, please, and nothing more, just responsive to the question. Please repeat your question.
Yes, Your Honor. You did hear Dr. Rogers' testimony in court today that people with a prolonged exposure to Drufo have a 1,000% greater risk of cancer, correct?
Yes.
With all of your research, you have stated that you are unaware of any study that shows a causal link between Drufo and cancer, correct?
Yes, as there is no study that exactly concludes this.
But that would mean that you somehow missed Dr. Rogers' study, correct?
Dr. Rogers' study was not peer-reviewed or exact, so I don't know how I could read that with truthfulness if it was not peer-reviewed and it was just.
Ms. Weirs, you don't mention Dr. Rogers' study in your witness statement, do you?
No.
Now let's discuss your current experience, your current situation. You are testifying as a specially retained expert in this case, correct?
Yes.
And that means that Lush Fertilizer hired you to testify for them, correct?
Yes.
And by your own admission, you have financial issues in your life, correct?
Yes, I do.
In fact, you have accumulated a lot of debt because of gambling, right?
Yes.
And you are in a financial hole that you have yet to climb out of, right?
Well, yes, but I'm working on it. I'm working at Applebee's and I'm working for the newspaper now. So obviously I'm trying to get out of it.
On top of those financial pressures, your father cut you off from any financial assistance, didn't he?
Yes, after my mother died, who was actually in charge of my financial support, he decided to cut me off since I decided not to go to college and instead I decided to conduct the research.
But your father did cut you off from this financial in part to pay for Ms. Dakota Weir's medical bills, correct?
Yes.
And you and Dakota are the only heirs of your father, aren't you?
Yes.
In your own words, you don't have a very close relationship with your twin, do you?
No, I don't.
Now let's discuss Drufo. You do agree that Drufo is potentially harmful for humans, correct?
Yes, I do. Just like any other fertilizer that has carcinogens in it.
Well, let's explore your answer. There are inherent risks from modern agricultural products, correct?
Yes.
In fact, there's never going to be a fertilizer that is truly safe, is there?
No, there's not.
And Drufo is a pesticide, isn't it?
Yes, but the whole idea of Drufo is that it reduces the amount of times you have to use it per year, which makes it less likely to have any causal links to cancer.
Ms. Weir's, pesticides are, by definition, poison, correct?
Well, yeah, the whole objective of them was to kill pesticides or bacteria or insects that are eating the plants or the crops. So obviously it's going to be poison, maybe not to humans, but maybe to other organisms.
So they are designed to kill living organisms, right?
Yes.
You cannot testify today that Drufo does not cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, can you?
No.
Indeed, the best you can say is that, from your perspective, the evidence on Drufo causing non-Hodgkin lymphoma is inconclusive, right?
Yes, and that's because I've done many hours of research to see all the views on this and have an opinion.
Finally, Ms. Weirs, it is true that you grew up with Dakota Weirs, correct?
Yes, it is.
But you, unlike your twin who worked with Drufo, never worked in the landscaping business, correct?
Yeah, I'm allergic to grass.
So you never used Drufo like your twin did?
Why would I use it if I'm allergic to grass?
So you never did use it?
No.
And you don't have non-Hodgkin lymphoma, do you?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, why are you so confident in the work that you produce?
Because I spent many hours doing this. If I wasn't confident, I wouldn't be here testifying today against my twin. Obviously, I'm still going to have a family connection. Why would I testify against my twin if I didn't think my views were true?
And why would Lush Fertilizer hire you on in this case?
Because I did so many hours of research and they trusted my research. Also, I was working at a publicly known newspaper publisher.
And Ms. Weirs, why did you choose not to go to college?
Because I felt like this was a more powerful thing to do, as I thought that my sibling was not going against the right thing.
And just finally for the jury, could you please restate your opinion on Drufo?
I honestly think that Drufo, I can't say it does not have any link to cancer, but it has a very little risk of cancer. But it's just like any other fertilizer. Every fertilizer has carcinogens in it. It's part of the chemicals.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. What I'd like to do is take a 15, 20-second rest here for just a minute and let me look at my notes. While I'm doing that, I understand we have one more witness for the defense. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And while I'm looking at my notes, can we do a quick time check and see how much time the defense has left on direct and the plaintiff has left on cross-exam?
I believe, Your Honor, for the defense, they have 8 minutes and 34 seconds left. And for the prosecution, they have 4 minutes and 26 seconds left.
Yeah, that's what we have too.
How much time is left for their team?
Which team, Your Honor?
Each team. Defense has 8 minutes, 34 seconds left for direct exam. Plaintiff has 4 minutes, 26 seconds left for cross-exam.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, are we ready to proceed with the defendant's final witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
The defense would like to call Mr. Blake Doncourt to the stand.
Mr. Doncourt, you've been sworn already. Counsel, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Blake Doncourt, can you state your name and spell the last for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Blake Doncourt, and my last name is spelled Doncourt.
And what's your occupation, Mr. Doncourt?
I am the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated.
And when did you join Lush Fertilizer Incorporated?
In about 2000, yeah. I joined Lush in 2000.
And as CEO, describe your company in 2000.
Lush Fertilizer was a company that was widely unknown to the public at the time.
And how has your company developed since then?
Well, we've grown.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for narrative.
Overruled.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. How has your company developed since the year 2000?
Well, we've grown from small roots to one of the largest commercial and yard fertilizer manufacturers in the world.
And we've heard a lot about Drufo today, but as CEO of the company that developed the chemical, can you tell us in your own words what it is?
Yes, Drufo is our flagship ingredient that we use in our fertilizer products.
And why was Drufo created?
Well, it was created so that we uphold our key promise in our company, which is to be entirely environmentally conscious. We also focus on decreasing the Earth's nitrogen footprint.
And what kind of research did your company do that relates to Drufo?
Well, our company conducted extensive research on all of our fertilizer products. And now there are the claims about Drufo being carcinogenic and being linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma. However, our research turned up none of the same claims that could concur with the same data.
And how has your product evolved from all this research that you've done?
Well, our research, we did extensive research on it, and it was actually certified by the EPA.
And how do you feel about Drufo being called carcinogenic?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance. How this witness feels about that claim is not relevant to the issue at hand.
Yeah, I agree with the objection. The feeling is not the issue here. So what is the relevance of that?
Your Honor, I'm just asking this to set the foundation for my client's entire opinion about today's court case and how Drufo is not carcinogenic at all and that it doesn't fit in line with the views of the company at all.
Okay, well, I'm going to sustain the objection in terms of how he feels about it.
Yes, Your Honor. Moving on, can I just talk about past employees with you?
Yes.
How does Carson Durst relate to this case today?
Oh boy. Well, Carson actually started working for Lush initially as an intern, and her job was to actually to discover if there are any potential harms or problems within our fertilizer products. We eventually had to fire her, but she went and took her experience and training from Lush to our biggest competitor, Terra's Greenery.
And you heard Carson's or Miss Durst's testimony here today, correct?
Yes, I did.
And what is your reaction to Carson's claims?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
Would you like me to re-ask that question, Mr. Durst?
Yes,
Or
please.
not on court, sorry. You heard Mrs. Durst's testimony today. What is your reaction to her claims about Drufo?
Well, one thing I know for sure is that these claims about Drufo being carcinogenic didn't even come up until after Carson was fired and started working for Terra's Greenery. Carson had every opportunity to bring Drufo's potential harm to our attention. We even lent our email system to the plaintiff's lawyers, and they found no message that would support her claim of Lush being warned.
And did you see the email brought up today in court?
Yes, I saw it on the screen, yes.
And have you ever seen that outside of today's case?
No, I haven't. Again, like on the screen, only time I've ever seen that document.
And how do you, or what is your reaction to Dakota Weir's being in this lawsuit?
Well, I'm thankful that her disease was discovered early and that her road to recovery looks promising. However, I am confident that Lush had no such cause in her illness.
And why do you say that?
Well, Lush Fertilizer has a very good background of developing safe and effective products. And we have been and still are extremely careful in the research and development of all of our fertilizers.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Dodd.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Doncourt. I have several questions for you as well. Let's begin with your profits. You do not bake any of your products because you believe baking costs too much. Isn't that right?
Yes, that is correct. There was actually no reason to really bake it because, well, there's no reason to it.
But you were so focused on the cost of baking that you created an extensive cost-benefit analysis, didn't you?
Yes, we did.
And not only did the company need to closely watch profits, but you yourself have faced several financial pressures, haven't you?
Well, that is true, yes, that companies have to manage their profits. I would agree.
And you have faced several financial pressures as well, haven't you?
Yes.
And some of that comes from a very large award that the divorce court gave to your ex-spouse, isn't that right?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Well, I think it goes to the witness's credibility and his financial interest. So I overrule the objection.
Yes, Your
Mr. Doncourt, part of your financial pressure has come from that divorce court with your ex-spouse, isn't that right?
Yes, it has.
Now let's talk about your knowledge of the dangers of Drufo. As you testified on direct, you are aware that Carson Durst produced an email in court today that showed potential carcinogenic qualities identified in samples of Drufo, aren't you?
Yes.
Didn't you call Ms. Durst a regrettable disappointment?
I did, yes.
And you claim to have never received this email that Ms. Durst showed us, correct?
Yes, I do claim that, and that is 100% true. I've never seen that email until today.
And you assert that that email is not real, correct?
Yes.
Therefore, you also assert that there is absolutely no risk to using your product whatsoever. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Mr. Doncourt, please turn to your witness statement, which should be on the screen momentarily. This is your witness statement, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And this is your signature?
Yep, that's my signature.
And right above your signature, you state, I have carefully reviewed this statement. It is true and accurate. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did. read that.
And you did take an oath at the beginning of this trial that you would faithfully and truthfully adhere to the facts of your witness statement, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Now on lines 28 and 30, you state our toxicology research and development team found nothing in the product, nor apparently did the EPA, to require a warning with the insignificant levels of toxicity in our fertilizer. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Now turning to lines 74 and 75, you state those are the same reports that were provided to me that said there was no significant cancer danger. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And finally, turning to lines 109 and 110 of your witness statement, you say, while baking the fertilizer would remove any risk that our fertilizer was carcinogenic. Did I read that properly?
Yes.
So you would agree with me then that there is, in fact, risk to using your fertilizer.
Well,
Objection, Your Honor, I would like to state that she is improperly quoting my witness and using an improper impeachment.
Well, again, the questions have already been asked and answered before there was any objection. So at this point, I don't see anything to rule on. It's already been asked and answered.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Doncourt, you did have the ability to scientifically guarantee that there would be no risk to using your product whatsoever. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And you chose not to take that step to ensure the safety of your product, didn't you?
Well, if you look a little bit lower on that last quote you showed on my affidavit, it does say that there was a significantly low danger within the product.
But Mr. Doncourt, you could have eliminated all danger, couldn't you?
Yes, you could argue that, but
And
a
you chose
significantly
not
low
to
danger-
eliminate that danger. Isn't that right?
Your Honor, I ask that my witness be able to finish his response.
Response, Your
Okay.
Honor.
No need. What is your response, Mr. Doncourt?
Well, I was adding on that with there being like a little danger, there is significantly low enough danger that there is no need to bake it.
But Mr. Doncourt, you did not bake it, did you?
No, we didn't. I
Objection,
didn't.
Your Honor.
No
Ask-
further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Mr. Doncourt, why didn't you bake your product?
Well, as I was saying earlier, there's significantly low risk, not no risk, but a low risk of carcinogenicity in our product. So there's no need to really fix what isn't already broken.
And you run a business, correct?
I do.
And would that be in your business interest to be expending money on baking?
No, that would not. As you were saying earlier, I do run a business after all.
And was that risk low enough? Or how low was that risk in your eyes?
Like I would say again, it was a significantly low enough risk to not bake it.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor. And I ask that my witness be able to step down from the stand, barring no recross.
Well, I don't believe there's any time left for recross, so we will dismiss the witness. And does the defense rest at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense rests.
All right. The next step will be closing arguments. Let's take a 30-second timeout so everybody can get organized, ready for closing arguments. And in 30 seconds, we'll begin. Okay, let's begin with closing arguments. Plaintiff, you will go first. Each side gets 5 minutes for closing, and the plaintiff is entitled to a rebuttal. If you would like any time, if you would like to reserve any time for rebuttal, you may do that. So
Yes, Your
plaintiff,
Honor. Before I begin, I would like to reserve any remaining time for my rebuttal.
any remaining time? Okay. Plaintiff, please proceed with your closing argument.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. That is what we have proven. The defendant put on the facade of being a good corporate citizen, holding itself out as an environmentalist and a philanthropist. But as you have seen, Lush's true identity is that of a corporation that sacrificed safety for profit. And I have the privilege of representing Ms. Weirs, a promising young pianist whose life has been destroyed by the negligence of Lush Fertilizer. We believe you will agree it is more likely than not that Lush Fertilizer was the cause of Ms. Weirs' non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Let's take a look at the jury instructions. Instruction number 2 requires that in order for you to find for Ms. Weirs, you must first find the following. 1, Lush Fertilizer manufactured a product containing a chemical compound known as Drufo. All witnesses in this case agree on that. 2, Lush Fertilizer failed to exercise reasonable care to prevent Drufo from creating a risk of harm. You heard all the evidence, especially the Langley email and Lush's own internal studies that proved Lush management knew about the dangers of Drufo. Carson Durst, who was employed by Lush, testified that when they found out Drufo causes cancer, they tried to bury that information. And 3, we must prove that Ms. Weirs has damages. Members of the jury, Drufo has devastated her life. We have proven negligence under jury instruction number 2. Next, let's look at jury instruction number 3, which is another way we can prove negligence. This instruction states we first must prove use of Drufo may be harmful. Again, you heard all the evidence, as well as our own expert testify to prove this very fact. Second, this instruction states that if that risk of harm is not obvious to a reasonable user, then the manufacturer must warn the user of the risk of harm. It is undisputed that Lush did not warn Ms. Weirs of that harm that they and they alone knew about. In fact, they failed to warn anyone. The connection between Drufo and cancer is so strong, the only thing the defendant can do is try to blame Ms. Weirs for using their own product. Do you hear how absurd that sounds? Yes, we agree Ms. Weirs did not cover herself from head to foot when working with fertilizer. The only thing the packaging said about wearing protective clothing was that not doing so could cause eye irritation. Members of the jury, if Lush knew about that harm and wanted to warn the public, why was there no warning to us about the risk of cancer? Let's talk about why. The defendant called Blake Doncourt, the CEO and the person who decided not to make the fertilizer. Why would he not eliminate all risk of harm? Because it would have cut into his profits. And remember, he needed that money to pay for his alimony. What about Skylar Weirs? Ms. Weirs, who has the temerity to testify against her own sister, lives somewhere out in left field and was an incredibly unreliable witness. She has no reliability as an expert. And finally, even the respectable Dr. Williams was forced by Lush today to repeat their propaganda that they didn't know Drufo was harmful. Members of the jury, Dr. Williams' job was on the line today, and she was simply repeating the mantra that the internal studies and the statistical significance for people who have used Drufo meant nothing. Jury instruction number 14 states you may believe all, part, or none of the testimony of a witness. The defense's witnesses are so incredibly biased, their testimony deserves no weight. I will ask in my rebuttal that you find in favor of Ms. Weirs. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. How much time is left for rebuttal?
1 minute, 10 seconds, Your Honor.
Thank you. Defense, closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, this case is simply miscalculated, misplaced, and misused. I'd first like to direct your attention to jury instruction number 2, which is our burden of proof. The plaintiff says that they have to prove 3 aspects, but in fact, they forgot to mention one key aspect. The third aspect on jury instruction number 2, which states that they must prove that the plaintiff was one of those persons the defendant should reasonably have expected to use the product. Not once today did you hear from any witness who testified Lush's fertilizers reasonably expected clients. While you might have heard stuff about lawn workers or landscapers or gardeners, not once did you hear from any witness here today that Lush fertilizer was created for the intent for lawn care workers as well as landscapers and gardeners to use. And based on that assertion alone, you must rule in favor of the defense. You must find Lush fertilizer not negligent. Now, I'd also like to direct your attention to jury instruction 3, another miscalculation and misplacement and misuse by the plaintiff. Jury instruction number 3 is a definition of negligence, not another avenue for them to prove negligence, but to simply define what it is. Again, based on jury instruction number 2, aspect number 3 alone, you must find in favor of the defense. But I'm going to go through this case again and explain to you why this case is miscalculated, misplaced, and misused. So first, let's talk about the miscalculations within this case. First, you heard from the plaintiff's expert witness, Dr. Casey Rogers, who testified that validity based on variability is fine. Again, you heard from our expert witness, Dr. Devin Williams, who testified that you must have controlled variables for a reasonable study. Again, with a bunch of variables not controlled in their study, it's simply not valid as a study. And based on that validity, you can't trust the study. In addition, it hasn't been peer reviewed or replicated by other scientists in their field. Again, they could say whatever they'd like to say in that study, but if it hasn't been peer reviewed, how do we know that their results are reliable? So let's talk about how this case is misplaced. As you heard from our expert, Skylar Weirs, she testified that Lush fertilizer is misplaced and misguided as a carcinogenic product. Drufo is not carcinogenic. In fact, it was created to reduce the amount of carcinogens within our fertilizer. It was created to reduce the amount of risks to the user. And it was taken in due care to reduce the amount of risk our individual users had to take. Now, how is this case being misused? I'd like to direct your attention to, again, jury instruction number 2, that the plaintiffs had damages that were caused by the defendant's negligence while the product was being used in a manner the defendant should have reasonably expected. As you heard from their own expert, Dr. Casey Rogers, they should have worn masks. They should have taken those precautions. It was on the business to supply the masks. It was on the business to provide their workers with the proper care. But as you heard from the plaintiff herself, no one wore a mask. No one wore protective clothing. And as the expert for the plaintiff, they knew that no one would wear a mask or protective clothing. And that was expected of all these users. It was expected by everyone using Lush fertilizer. It was expected. But Lush took an additional measure with user safety recommendations to warn our users of our product, to warn the users of possible harm. And it was over the top. It wasn't required by law. But Blake Doncourt and his company chose to do it anyway. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we do not bear the burden of proving to you by the preponderance of the evidence that Lush fertilizer was negligent. And based on aspect 3 of jury instruction number 2, they haven't proven anything. They haven't proven 40%, 30%, 20%, or even 10%. They simply failed to talk about it at all. And in addition, we have proven to you that Dakota Weirs acted in a manner that was reasonably expected by not wearing a mask and not wearing protective clothing. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's only one aspect in this case. There's only one decision that you can reach based on jury instruction number 2, section 3. Lush fertilizer was not negligent because the plaintiff has miscalculated, misplaced, and misused their case. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Ms. Kidder, you have 1 minute and 10 seconds. Any rebuttal argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Members of the jury, opposing counsel told you that we needed to prove Lush Fertilizer would have reasonably expected Ms. Weirs to use their product. If Lush Fertilizer did not want landscaping companies to use their lawn product, then who did they expect to use their products? Ms. Weirs was someone that they would have reasonably expected to be working with this product on a daily basis. Furthermore, they said that jury instruction number 3 is a definition of negligence. They are exactly right, members of the jury. And by definition, under jury instruction number 3, Lush Fertilizer was negligent. Miscalculated, misplaced, and misused. They are exactly right, members of the jury. Lush Fertilizer miscalculated the risks of Drufo. They misplaced studies proving that Drufo was carcinogenic, and they misused their power. They had the ability to guarantee that there was no risk to using their product, and they did nothing with that knowledge. After you find for Ms. Weers, we ask that you award her the damages she has proven. She asks for $5 million. Prove to Lush Fertilizer that they can never do this to anyone else. Find for Ms. Weers. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. So that concludes the trial. The matter will now be submitted to the jury for deliberation. And while that is being done, the scoring panelists will now fill out their scoring sheets. So we'll remain here. Everybody can turn their cameras on if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to, but we'll let the scoring panelists do their job now. And our courtroom monitor will be back in touch shortly. So everybody can relax.
All right, Judge, we are good to go.
Okay, so the next thing we do here is we have a few minutes for some feedback. Each of the scoring panelists get to talk for 1 or 2 minutes, and then I will talk for 1 to 2 minutes, and then we'll be done. Who would like to go first on the scoring panel?
I'm happy to go first, Judge.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to commend both teams on your performance today. I say this every time I judge. It's one of the reasons I like doing it so much. I am just constantly impressed with both the attorneys and the witnesses on your preparation and just your presentation of your case and the confidence with which you do that and answer questions and objections. And so I think you should all be very proud of your performance today because I thought both teams did an excellent job. A couple of points that I was particularly impressed with. I think some of the hardest moments in a court is thinking on your feet, responding to objections, or if a witness isn't giving you the answer that you want or responding, they give you a little nugget on cross to keep going with that. And I saw many instances from both teams where you were able to kind of think on your feet and respond and react very quickly and effectively, which is a very hard skill to learn. So I was really impressed with that. I also thought everybody's level of professionalism and adhering to court decorum was great. It's a learned skill in some ways, learning how the courtroom works and how to respond to objections and the judge. And I thought everybody did a really great job. I would say just one point to keep in mind, and this is a really hard point, particularly in a case example like this, that's just very complicated and can be technical and focusing on a lot of details, is sometimes simplification is your best friend in trying to just present a very clear and concise case to the jury, because you all just know the case inside and out so well. But I would just think about, is there a way to just break this down a little bit simpler to really walk the jury through my questioning line to get that point across? But overall, really, really great job.
Ms. Gomez, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record because I had a lot of the same takeaways, which I think just shows that you guys came across well on my end as well. Everybody definitely, you knew the facts well, you knew your questions, you knew what your answers were going to be, you really knew the material, which is one of the most important things always when you're going into a trial, whether it's mock or real, you want to know what's going on and be the person who's going to know the answer or how to trick that up. And I think you all had really good command of that. And then we're able to kind of call back answers out of your witnesses, or able to get things in with your answers kind of because you knew something, even if that wasn't exactly what the attorney coming at you was going with. I also, just a little side point, I loved your guys' closing arguments were great. I can tell that there's some really, really strong argumentative skills there. And I think a lot of that probably came from teamwork too. And so I know it's not just the attorneys who were doing the closings, but I think you each had a really good focus on the theme of your case and on your side. So that came across really clearly, especially at the end. The kind of little critique or suggestion with that is to each witness you're going with, really bring that back and think, what am I trying to get here overall for my case? What is my closing? What are those main points? And make sure you're touching on that every time. So it's this really cohesive thing through. And so we're not coming in at the end being like, oh, that is a really great point. I hadn't been thinking about that as much throughout. And so really making there's that consistency and kind of that boiling it down a little bit like she was talking about. So we know very clearly that theme. But yeah, everybody did great. You guys were confident. You knew what you were doing. I think it came across really well.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Ms. Gomez and Ms. Whitcop said. I'm very, very impressed with how you all did. It looks like you put a lot of work and effort into this. And so I definitely commend you for that. Yeah, great job knowing the information, especially like some of the more technical stuff like carcinogens and stuff that I have no idea about. Like you learned it and you were able to talk about it. So great job with that. And yeah, I would agree. The closing arguments were excellent. Excellent presentation for both closing arguments. Mr. Damon, am I pronouncing that correct?
You are.
Okay. Great job tying your theme into the jury instructions. That was excellent. Anytime you can bring your theme into any part of your presentation of your case is great. And so good job with that. Just a couple little notes, and this is kind of ticky-tacky, but and this is pretty much for everybody. When you're doing your cross exam and you're asking your questions, get rid of the correct and right and didn't you and that's what you did, correct? It gets a little bit distracting and it's just not necessary. Just ask your question, make your statement, let the witness answer and move on. And then just everybody's style is a little bit different and you're going to find your own style the more you do this. For a couple of the advocates on cross-exam and a couple of the witnesses, you came out a little hot. And if that's your style, that's good, but just be careful and keep in mind that you're going to, win over, you're more persuasive with honey than with vinegar, if you know what I mean. So, just something to bear in mind, but everyone did a great job and congratulations to all of you.
I have 4 comments, and the first one ties right into that last comment, and that is about vinegar versus sugar. I think you guys are very well prepared, and that showed with your conviction and your passion, because you couldn't have had that much conviction or had that much passion if you didn't know this stuff backwards and forwards. And that was very obvious. And that's a good thing. Number 2, with impeachment, I'd go back to your coaches and work on that. I think it happened on both sides where there was impeachment with a statement. And after it had been done, there was then an objection that it was improper impeachment. I would just work on that and try to get it down pat as to how you do it. And I forget the exact question and answer, but something like, you didn't bake the product because you wanted to save money, and then the witness would waffle on that. And then you'd want to go to the statement. Simply say, ask your question, the witness waffles and say, didn't you say in your statement blah, blah, blah. And if the witness says, I don't know, I don't remember, you can show them the statement to refresh their recollection. And you don't show it, you don't admit it, you just have the witness look at it. And then the witness goes, oh yeah, now I remember I did say that. If the witness denies it, then you go into the impeachment. So I would get that down pat. And if the other side has an objection, make your objection before it's all done. Point number 3. There were a lot of objections in this trial, and there were a lot of really good objections. And there were some that I think could have gone either way. You did a very good job of making objections, but you did it in a civil way, and that's good. And civility and professionalism are extremely important in real life trial work. Contrary to what you see on TV and the movies, civility and professionalism are paramount. Last comment, timekeepers. I loved it when you went on screen with the fingers. That was very helpful to me. Presenters, I hope it was helpful to you, but it was very good. So thank you all very much. Excellent job. I think we're all done with this.
You are all done. You guys are more than welcome to take your leave.
I think I heard there was a question.
Oh.
No? Nope. Maybe I misheard. Okay. Thank you all. Best of luck. Take care.